Hey guys, it's Fertiles here, and I'm going to be starting the series with uh, Vladimir Tod, the Chronicles of Vladimir Tod. That is by Heather Brewer. I should know this. I love this book, but I haven't read it in forever. So, yeah, I'm going to be reading this for the first thing. Should be This one is 8th Grade Bites, the first book in the series. I'm staring at myself and not you guys, I'm sorry. I'm probably going to end up fixing this, re-recording it several times. Okay. Let us read this. I guess you call it like an introduction, overview, sort of thing. Introducing you to the world of Vladimir Tod. Sorry, it's like 9 in the morning. I got up. I'm going to mow the lawn later. So, yeah, that's that. So let me begin. Vladimir Tod, normal 8th grade student or powerful vampire. Junior high really sinks for 13-year-old Vladimir Tod. Bullies harass him, the principal is dogging him, and the girl he likes prefers his best friend. Oh, and Vlad has a secret. His mother was human, but his father was a vampire. Not sure if he was a vampire or an incubus. We'll get into that some other time on a rant. With no idea of the extent of his powers and no one to teach him, Vlad struggles daily with his blood cravings and his enlarged fangs. When a strange substitute teacher begins to question him a little too closely, Vlad worries that his cover is about to be blown. But then he realizes he has a much bigger problem. He's being hunted by a vampire who's closing in. Fast. This first book in this ghoulishly funny series leads readers on nail-biting adventures on a nail-biting adventure that is filled with dark characters and mystical glyphs, secret identities and hidden agendas, unearthly powers, and teenage angst. That's how I've always been pronouncing that word. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce that word. So, without any further ado, shall we continue? I'm going to read the acknowledgements because that's my first thing. If you guys don't like the acknowledgements, I'll skip over them in the next one. Okay. To my husband Paul, Stephen King knows why, and to every unpopular kid in small town America. That means you, small town America. Acknowledgements. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my wonderful editor, Maureen Sullivan, and everyone else at Dutton. I think that's how that's pronounced. D-U-T-T-U-N? D-U-T-T-O-N. Sorry. As well as my fabulous agent, Michael Boret. Probably French. for their direction, wisdom, assistance, and guidance. Collectively, you've changed my life in ways you may never know. Many thanks to Jackie Kessler and Dawn Vanneman for being faithful readers, wonderful friends, and much-needed critics. Special thanks should be given to Jacob Elwert and Caitlin Vanneman for loving this book from the start. Many thanks to all my minions, you know who you are. Thanks should also be expressed to the Pepsi-Cola Company for supplying me with enough caffeine to finish the book, and to Arden, who really started this whole mess in the first place, and to Jacob and Alexandria. Thanks for not popping my bubble too often. That's embarrassing. Sorry, guys. Most important, thanks to the person holding this book right now. You have no idea what you mean to me, how much you mean to me, or Vlad. Finally, words alone cannot express the thanks I owe to Paul Brewer, my husband, for his encouragement and assistance. You knew I could do it before I had any clue. Thank you. That's the acknowledgements. It's a little weird, but here we are. Okay, so the first chapter is like 2 pages long, and then the next one's like 13 pages long. So, 5 minutes now. I'm probably going to read the first 2 chapters. And then I'll go and call it there. Okay. Where is the boy? That is chapter 1. A tree branch slapped John Craig across the face, scraping his skin, but he kept running on and ignoring the stabbing pine needles on his bare feet. He could hear the man's footsteps behind him, echoing his own. The man was getting closer. A fallen branch grabbed John's ankle, and he fell forward. Time slowed to a crawl as his face neared the leaf-covered ground. Cold air whipped around his skin. His heart drummed in his ears. The man's pace quickened, and just as John's cheek smacked against the earth, the stranger grabbed a fistful of John's hair and pulled his head back. John screeched, "What do you want from me?" But his attacker didn't answer. John swung his arms behind him to knock the man down, but his hands were caught effortlessly in the air and bound behind him. A hand glove in shiny black leather entered his field of vision, clutching a torn page from the Bathory Gazette. What page? Oh, that's embarrassing. John's head jerked back as the man gave his hair a violent tug and growled, "Where is he?" At the center of the paper was a grainy image of a 13-year-old boy John knew well. The boy was surrounded by several of his peers and a teacher, but looked nervous, awkward. At the bottom of the photo, the caption read, "Left to right. Kelly Anbrock, Carrie Anderson, Henry McMillan, teacher John Craig, Vladimir Tod, Edgar Poe, Mike Brennan." On the top, a bold title, "Debate team sure to win at regionals." Tears coated John's cheek, but he shook his head, refusing to answer. Something warm and slick ran down John's forehead. Through red-tinted glass, he looked at the forest around them. He screamed for help until his lungs burned, but help wouldn't come. "Where's the boy? Where's Vlad?" John wriggled. The man's face was near his. Cold breath beat down on the back of his neck, and something sharp grazed against his skin. "Tell me, or die." John opened his mouth to speak, but it was too late for lies. The man bit down. Fangs popped through John's skin, cutting deep into his neck. Chapter 2. Halloween. Vlad turned to the side, admiring his image in the mirror with a smirk. Henry was going to lose it when he saw Vlad's costume. They hadn't discussed what they were dressing up as, but the pathetic black nylon cape and plastic fangs that Vlad had picked up at the Stop and Shop last weekend were sure to be the running gag of the evening between them. Breakfast. He brushed his black hair back from his eyes and slipped the plastic teeth into his mouth. They fit perfectly over his own fangs, which were protruding slightly despite his large dinner. Not an hour before, Aunt Nellie had warmed 2 sizable steaks until the blood dripped from the raw meat. He restrained himself from picking up the steaks with his bare hands, ripping into them, but only because Aunt Nellie insisted on mannerisms. Manners. Even though it agonized him to do so, he took his time, cutting the steak into medium-sized bites, dropping page, and sucking the juices into his hungry mouth before dropping the dry, tasteless meat onto his plate. Well, that shows you where the taste comes from in your beef and steaks and etc. Comes from the blood. Unless it's chicken. If there's blood in your chicken, you don't want it. He pulled the fake teeth out of his mouth and examined the sharp points of his fangs. "Aunt Nellie, you better get a snack pack ready." "But you just ate," came a lilting voice from the bottom of the stairs. "Oh well, better safe than sorry, I suppose. What time will Henny be here?" "Any minute." Satisfied with his costume, Vlad turned from the mirror. The old floorboards creaked beneath his sneakers. He kissed his fingers and pressed them to the frame on his dresser. In the photo, his mother was poised on the edge of an old Victorian chaise. I think that's how it's pronounced. Probably. I'll have to look that up. With his father, standing behind her, his pale hands on her shoulders. They were smiling at the camera, and Vlad found himself smiling back at them. He opened the top drawer and stuffed $10 from his secret box into his pocket. Parting with Henry had taught him one thing above all else: be prepared. Vlad left his bedroom to make his way down the stairs, and Aunt Nellie stood at the bottom, holding a plastic container covered with saran wrap. He could see the deep red, slushy contents through the wrap and licked his lips. Did you microwave it? It's better warm. It's warm enough. She handed it to him and widened her eyes in disgust as he bit through the saran wrap and slurped. Use a spoon. You'll get it all over the rug. I just had it cleaned. Between that rug and your t-shirts, the dry cleaner thinks we're either accident-prone or axe murderers. And take it easy on the snack packs tonight. Mr. Midnight Feeder, there are only 2 left. I'd better bring some more blood bags from the hospital tonight and fix up enough for the rest of the week. Could you get O positive this time? It's my favorite. If I remember correctly from health class, O positive is the universal donor. I don't know why that's his favorite, but to each their own, I guess. She nodded and he smiled, brushing past her to the kitchen. He was spooning a big, sweet glob of half-frozen blood into his mouth when the doorbell rang. I've tasted blood. It's not sweet. It's very irony. Quite literally, it tastes like iron. Of course, never mind. Okay. I'm going to continue. I keep interrupting. I'm sorry. With a hurried swallow, he dropped the empty container into the biohazard box beneath the sink and popped the plastic fangs over his shrinking canines. With careful steps, he snuck over to the wall just right to the archway and peeked over at the front door, where his aunt was greeting Henry with a hug. Excuse me. Vlad jumped out from behind the separating wall and held his cheap cape out with both arms. I want to suck your blood. Henry doubled over, roaring with laughter. When he was straightened, he slapped Vlad on the shoulder. That's a sweet costume. Check me out. You'll just die. Henry placed his fist on his hips with a pseudo-Superman pose, and when he turned his head, Vlad's jaw dropped at the sight of 2 small holes on Henry's neck. No way. He stepped closer to inspect Henry's bite marks. They were flawless. Vlad had only seen one actual vampire bite on a human before, and Henry's handiwork was close to the real thing. What'd you use? Silly putty and raspberry jam. So, note to you guys, if you ever want realistic vampire fangs, first measure, then silly putty and raspberry jam. See this? Well, duh, can't have any seeds in my wound, like infected. Aunt Nellie regarded Vlad with a concerned glance over the top of her glasses. Did you get enough to eat? Vlad nodded, stuffed a tube of his sunscreen into his pocket, and opened the door. Party's over at midnight. Nellie held out her hand. You won't need that. I want you to be home by 11. 11? At times, Nellie can be ridiculously overprotective. Okay. He's in 8th grade. He's a vampire. My parents wouldn't let me be out past 9 in 8th grade. They still don't let me out past 10. And I'm a senior in high school now. Overprotective, my left cheek. Vlad rolled his eyes and took the tube back out, slapping it into Nellie's hand. But no one else will be leaving early, and besides, at midnight there's supposed to be some big surprise. Nellie looked at Henry for confirmation. He nodded enthusiastically. We can't miss it. Well, she bit her lip in contemplation, and after what seemed like an eternity, she sighed. All right, let's stick together. And if you get hungry, give me a call on my cell. I'll be at Deb's until late. Henry nudged Vlad with his elbow. Matthew called me earlier, said Meredith will be there. Vlad shot him a look that screamed, shut up, and they bounded out the door, vampire and victim. Nellie called after them. Be careful, boys. Other than the faked wound, Henry was dressed as he normally was. With a pair of ratty-looking sneakers on his feet, he gave Vlad a sly glance. Big thing at midnight, huh? Vlad shrugged and adjusted his cape around his shoulders. I'm a creature of the night, for God's sake. And she wants me to be home by 11? I don't think so. Why doesn't she just follow me to the party and kiss me goodbye? Hey, don't knock it. If it weren't for Nellie, you'd never get kissed. Vlad slowed his steps. If you guys are going to keep watching me read, you're going to have to get used to me reading way too fast for my mouth and stumbling over the words. See, I'm not even reading, and I'm stumbling over the words. I'm probably going to keep this. It's long, but it's decent. I mean, I'm doing random crap. If I didn't increase my limit, I would have already gone over by a minute. Yeah, a minute. Vlad slowed his steps. Like you've got room to talk. Henry shrugged. I've kissed plenty of girls. I'm not talking about your mom, dork. They turned down Elm at the end of the street. There we go. And at the end of the street, Vlad could see cars stopping in front of Matthew's house. A blur of people moved from vehicle to house, and Vlad felt a twinge of nervousness settle into his muscles. The headlights from one of the cars that had been in front of Matthew's house turned towards them, blinding Vlad temporarily. Henry had shoved his hands into his pocket and was walking with his attention keenly focused on the sidewalk. Neither am I. I'm talking about girls like Carrie Anderson and Stephanie Braun. Stephanie will kiss anyone. Well then. Yeah, I know. Henry's smile returned. Her sister's cute, though. Vlad raised an eyebrow, half chuckling. Dude, that's gross. She just turned 12. So? He grinned broadly. 8th grade. That's like 2 years difference. That's not that bad. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Oh well. So you'll be 14 in 2 months. It's gross. Vlad shook his head and looked down at his right shoe, where his toe was poking through a tear. Impossibly, Henry's grin broadened. She's nice. Whether or not a girl will kiss you isn't measured on how nice she is. Ahead, Vlad could see a hint of soft blue sweater and angel wings disappearing into Matthew's front door. Meredith. He overheard her in 3rd period yesterday, gushing over what she planned to wear. It was that moment that he decided to accept the invitation to the party, last minute or not. So what is Einstein? Vlad stopped in his tracks. Henry had stopped walking as well, and tilted his head with a curious gleam in his eyes. Sorry, yawn. Vlad nodded and said, girls that make out in the back of a band room aren't nice. Well, that's not very fair at all. I never told you it was the band room. Henry furrowed his brow and grabbed Vlad's shoulder for a second, lowering his voice so eavesdroppers couldn't hear. Dude, don't do that freaky mind-reading stuff. I hate that. Vlad shrugged and kept walking. Henry nudged Vlad with his elbow and gestured to a group of 3 or 4 trick-or-treaters in front of them with a nod. Want some candy? I shouldn't. Nellie still ticked about last year. Vlad shoved his hands into his pockets and looked from his best friend to the kids on the sidewalk. You know, those kids told their parents they were attacked by a vampire, and that idiot Officer Thompson started asking my aunt all sorts of questions. If people find out about me, about what I am... Oh, come on. Henry had stepped in front of him, partially blocking Vlad's view of the 4 receding 4th graders. 2 were dressed as superheroes of some sort. The 3rd wore the same cape that Vlad had on. No. There were only 3. Sorry. I misread. It'll be funny. Besides, if you don't do it, I'm totally telling Meredith that you like her. Harry turned away, wrapped his arms around himself, making kissing sounds. Dude, not cool, Vlad seethed. The grin on Henry's face made it clear that he wasn't about to let a good gag go without a fight. With a shaking head, Vlad relented. If we get caught, you will be big time. Followed by a yawn. Henry beamed. "And I did that without any of the special powers normally associated with best friends of the undead." Henry stepped to the side, and Vlad moved past him, ducking through the tall bushes that lined the sidewalk. Vlad ran as quietly as he could until he stood half a block ahead of his costume victims. After shimmering up an old oak tree, the bark rough on his hand as he climbed, Vlad scooted out onto a long, thick branch and waited for the fourth graders, while Henry stayed in the bushes. He could feel Henry's approving eyes on him and had to stifle a chuckle. As the superheroes and their vampire comrade approached the tree Vlad was perched in, their fingers clutched pillowcases filled with sugary treats. Vlad popped the plastic fangs out of his mouth and stuffed them in his front pocket. He let his imagination wander a bit, through rivers of blood and hunger that screamed to be sated. Touching the tip of his tongue to his newly exposed fangs, he leaned forward until his feet slipped from the branch. Wind brushed his hair back from his face as he descended then, with a flicker of concentration. Vlad willed his body forward, arms outstretched, his fangs exposed, his throat releasing a low, guttural growl. He floated closer to the boys until he was just above their heads, and screamed. The superheroes dropped their pillowcases and bolted in the blur of capes and shrieking terror. The vampire was left behind, staring up at Vlad in a horrified moment that dragged on forever. Vlad screamed again, so did the boy, finally relinquishing his hold on the bag. He was frozen to the spot. Vlad wondered if he would ever run away. Vlad could hear the boy's heart pounding against his ribs, a loud thunder echoing through his mind. He heard the whoosh of rushing blood, and felt the boy's tightened panic in his own chest. Then, in a blink, Vlad saw himself floating down, cheap plastic cape fluttering behind him, bright, sharp fangs shining in the streetlight. The urge to wet his pants was undeniable, but what would Mark and Tom think if they saw? But then, why should he care what they thought? They were mean jerks and had run away without him, and when they found out he was dead the next day, they'd feel awful, deserved to. Vlad blinked again, squeezing his eyes tight and opening them once more. His feet came to a rest on the ground in front of the boy. He read the little vampire's thoughts without even trying. Vlad whispered, "You should get home now," which seemed to be the magic words required to release the boy's feet from where they'd been cemented to the sidewalk. The boy ran past him, the pitter-patter of his steps quieting as he shrank down the street in the direction of his companions had gone. Henry burst from the bushes, cackling wildly, and snatched one of the fallen pillowcases from the pavement. "Did you see his face? I thought he was going to wet himself." He dug out a pack of peanut butter cups and tore open the orange wrapper. Stuffing one of the cups into his mouth, he held out the other to Vlad. "Now, I think you all know what peanut butter cups and orange wrapper is. The author is very good about copyright and other things that make no sense to me in the world of marketing. On to the book." I mean, there's like 5 pages left, and I'm already almost half an hour in. Okay. Vlad lifted the sweet chocolate to his lips and bit, his fangs shrinking back for it in his moment of confusion. The candy melted in his mouth, but he found little pleasure in it. Henry ran ahead, calling over his shoulder for Vlad to hurry. Vlad picked up the little vampire's bag, ran to catch up just as Henry was stepping onto the porch of Matthew's house. Music was blaring from the open door, and flecks of colored lights hit the porch from inside. Matthew's mom greeted them with laughter. "Well, come in, you evil dudes. The party's just started, and it's totally rockin'." Vlad and Henry exchanged looks. It was both sad and annoying when adults tried to act cool. "You know who you are." Without comment, they walked inside. The living room furniture had been pushed back against the walls, and a large mirrored disco ball was suspended from the ceiling. Bursts of fog occasionally covered the floor with a hiss. Vlad counted 20 of his schoolmates before he gave up trying to figure out how many were there, but not before he noticed Meredith standing near the punch bowl at the opposite end of the room, giggling with several of her girlfriends. I'm gonna yawn again because because it's 9:30 now, and I woke up just a minute ago. Henry nudged him and said something, but Vlad couldn't hear over the loud music, so he nodded much as Henry was swallowed by the crowd. Left his own devices. Vlad took an empty spot at the end, near the couch, and waited for Henry to return. Bill Jensen and Tom Gaber were moving towards the front door. Vlad shrank into his seat, hoping they wouldn't notice him. Bill looked straight at him and pulled Tom's sleeve until Tom nearly fell over top of Vlad. "Oh, my God. Check this geek out." Tom guaffed. "Nice costume, goth boy." Vlad glared and turned away. "Nice breath, loser." Matthew's mom was standing near the door watching the situation with pity-filled eyes. Vlad wished she'd look away, but she continued to stare as the skinny, pale, unpopular boy was picked on. He hoped she'd have enough sense not to try to comfort him after they'd gone, or worse, before. To Vlad's relief, Bill and Tom started moving to the door. Then, to rub salt in the wound, Bill yelled as loud as he could, "Bite me." A hot flash shot through Vlad's insides, and in that moment he was prepared to oblige. He could feel his incisors lengthening, pushing his plastic fangs down away from his gums. Clamping his mouth shut, he waited a moment to be certain Bill and Tom had gone, and then stepped onto the porch and stretched, knowing it would take a few minutes to calm his hunger. The cool quiet of the wraparound porch was a much welcome distraction from the party. Bill and Tom's taunts left him with that uncomfortable, hollow sensation, for which the only known cure was a few hours at home, battling evildoers for the fate of the earth. People could say what they wanted about video games contributing to the delinquency of minors, but Vlad was sure that if Bill and Tom had spent more time playing PlayStation, they'd spend far less taunting him. He flopped down on the porch swing and listened to the music pouring out of the front door. He was kidding himself if he thought he'd be able to ask Meredith to the dance. Girls like Meredith Brookstone didn't date boys like Vladimir Tod. Besides, hickeys would be a nightmare. His fangs shrank back, and as he stood, he heard Meredith's voice, sweet and giggly, coming through the open kitchen window. "Are you asking me out?" Let me try that again. I don't know if I can. Oh God, I don't know if I can do that. I'm just gonna leave it at that, because I don't know if I can do that, and I don't want to bring any injustice to that. Vlad's heart sank into his stomach, then squeezed its way down his leg, and popped out of a hole in his shoe, where it struck the floor and broke. That's what it felt like, anyway. He snuck over to the window, and, holding his breath, peeked inside. Henry was sitting on the kitchen counter, his sneakers dangling. He leaned forward and whispered to Meredith, whose soft brown hair was swept behind each ear. Her lips were pursed into a pout, while she listened. Vlad tried not to jump to conclusions, but the sight of Henry's lips moving just inches from Meredith's pretty ear was enough to send his mood plummeting to levels of jealousy he'd not been aware he was capable of experiencing. We've all been there. Henry glanced up at the window. Vlad ducked, but it was too late. He'd been seen. Moments later, Henry was on the porch. That wasn't what it looked like. Vlad tried to play it cool, to grasp the last remaining thread of dignity he'd had and come off uncaring and nonchalant. Instead, his voice cracked and a lump formed in his throat. This was a mistake. Maybe I should just go home. Already? What about Meredith? Vlad hurried ahead, shrugging as he descended the porch steps. Looked to me like she was in good hands. Henry followed, stopping Vlad with a hand on his shoulder. "You got it all wrong. I was trying to hook you up for the dance." He looked at Vlad. "You believe me, don't you?" Sure, he believed Henry, but it was hard to ignore the fact that Henry was probably the most crushed-on guy at Barthorpe Junior High. At times, the wistful sighs from interested girls as they passed in the hall were deafening. Still, this was Henry. If Vlad could trust anyone, it was him. Vlad managed to smile. "Of course I do." He continued down the steps, with Henry following close behind. "Did you hear about Mr. Craig?" "What, is he going to be out sick for another week? I don't think I can handle any more of Snellgrove's Pop quizzes. Henry slowly slowed his steps. People are saying he's been declared missing. No way. Vlad stopped walking for a moment and let it sink in. With concentrated effort, he moved forward, trying to erase the possibilities from his mind. Gold, does anybody know anything? Henry had lost the pillowcase, but his front pockets were bulging with candy. Not really. They just say he up and disappeared. Weird. Yeah. The serious expression of Henry wore was replaced by his familiar grin again. Hey, did you see Stephanie's sister in there? She was looking pretty nice. Vlad shook his head and turned the corner towards home. Dude, seriously. She's 12. That's the 2 chapters. It is 31 minutes. With editing, it might be a little bit less if I edit it. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for watching and reading. Like, comment, suggestions. I'm thinking about finishing the book, finishing the series as one of the things. It is Wednesday, so Wednesdays I will be doing Vladimir Tod from now on until I finish the series. Then I'll have to replace it with something. If you guys liked this, hit like, subscribe. There's going to be more, and comment your suggestions. Thank you guys for watching. I've been Fertile Lulz, and goodbye.